In this video, we're headed to the Triple Crown of Rotting, one of the premier car and truck events in the world, and this is only its second year in existence. Altogether, there was more than 2,000 cars on hand for the Triple Crown of Rotting, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 vendors, and this event's going to continue to grow because there's so much buzz around it, there's so much excitement around it. So my video is barely going to scratch the surface of this event, but if you want to see more about this event, there's lots of places that you can check it out. There is Rana's Radar. She did some pretty in-depth coverage of this event with lots of great interviews of the builders and things like that. And then there's Not Stock Photography, that's John Jackson. There's plenty of other channels that did coverage as well. Hot Rod Dad's one of them, so definitely check them out. If you're interested in this event, there's plenty of content to see, and I'm just kind of sticking to my guns here as far as things that I love, old school hot rods, traditional hot rods, gassers, and things like that. So let's get right into it. Right off the bat, I saw this 32 Ford 3-window coupe, and I love the stance on this car, but the thing that really got my attention is that engine that's poking out from under the hood. That's a Ford flathead V8 with Arden cylinder heads. If you look a little closer, that's actually a aluminum block that's been polished. I mean, this thing is like show car quality, but it's got some serious vintage speed parts. So it's got 8-stack fuel injection, but it is EFI instead of mechanical. And if you look up under it, this thing's just as nice underneath as it is on the top. It's got a fully polished quick change rear end, lots of chrome underneath, lots of painted surfaces everywhere, and this thing's just got a killer stance. It's got ET wheels on the back with some big Hoosier tires. It's got some cool looking wheels on the front that kind of mimic a Hallobrand spindle mount, but they're bolt-on and they're polished aluminum. Really good looking combination on this car. Another car that jumped out at me is this 58 Chevrolet Bel Air. Now, starting in 58, the Bel Air was actually a lower trim level just below the Impala, and these things would normally have less chrome on them, but look at all the stainless trim on this car. Lots of cool stuff, and this is a 1-year only body. These things were really unique, not always loved by custom car builders or restorers, but they're really cool looking when they're done up like this. You can see that diamond stitching, and even the floor mats are diamond stitched. You can just see all the details in here. Lots of engine turning, lots of great plating, lots of good finishes and textures on this car that really give you that 60s custom look. And overall, the stance is cool. It's got a cool front bumper and grille treatment. You can see the stripes. The pinstripes are just right. Lots of great details, and of course it's sitting on a set of appliance wire wheels with narrow white walls. A great combination for this custom car. When it comes to stance, it's not going to get much better than this 32 Ford 3-window, and they did a lot to get this thing to sit this low and to look this mean. You can tell on some of these cars they scoot the front axle forward a little bit. They do a little bit of massaging here and there, but this one is just a mean hot rod. It's got a set of flames on it, and you can see that lettering on the door. It says the Virginia Kid, which is kind of a nod to the California Kid, which we'll see in just a minute. It's got a nice old school interior, very simple and very clean. And as we back away, we can just see that stance. We've got louvered hood panels. We've got a little tiny moon tank in front of the grill shell. This is just a cool hot rod. Now here's a pretty wild one. This is a dragster before the slingshot era came into play. The frame is just made out of C-channel. You can see that they've really opened up that front axle to reduce weight. It's got little friction shocks on it, 16-inch motorcycle wheels and motorcycle tires, and it's got a 24 stud flathead V8 with a really wild looking contraption for that cooling system, open headers, 3 deuces, and then we look back here, this is a Model A type body that's just kind of pieced together at the very back of the car, and it's got a very small roll bar in it. Not a lot going on back here. This is definitely a very simplistic drag car. Rooster's Rod Shop built the little dragster, and they also built this really cool rolling chassis. I'm interested to see what this thing's going to look like when it's finished. It's obviously got some really high-end details, a lot of gold plating on this thing. But look at this engine. We got a Chevrolet W motor, lots of polished components up top, a really cool looking combination. We've got cheater slicks on the back. This is going to be a wild one. No matter how many times you see Big Red, whether it's in a magazine or in person, this car is always impressive because it is a steel-bodied 69 Camaro, but underneath it's all race car. It's got a killer road race suspension under it. It's got a crazy roll cage, and it has a huge big block in it. This thing's got a 555 cubic inch combination. The naturally aspirated version puts out over 1,000 horsepower, and then there's a Pro Charge version that puts out 1,900 horsepower. This thing has run 266.2 miles per hour in a standing start 1.5 mile race. It set a Bonneville land speed record at 258.6 miles per hour, and it has reached the top of Pikes Peak in 11 minutes and 8 seconds. This is a legendary car, and it's definitely the start of the pro touring and G machine movement that we're still seeing today. Now here's a timeless hot rod. This is a 34 Ford 3-window coupe built by Jim Jacobs, also known as Jake. He's the partner of Pete and Jake's. It's got some Firestone dirt track tires on the back of it. It's got wire wheels. It's got a cool Ford truck grill that's been cut down, and it's just a legend of the hot rod world. And now for something a little bit different. This is the 8-Ball 33, a completely scratch-built custom car that's fashioned after a 33 Ford. You can see that this thing is downsized dramatically. This is a small block Chevy, and it looks like a giant in this car. It's got little tiny motorcycle tires on the front with homemade wheels. This thing is just a crazy homemade contraption, and it's super cool. Now this combination was hard to ignore. We got a 57 Chevy Nomad pulling an aluminum trailer with a classic Corvette on the back. I'm assuming that's about a 57 Corvette. It's definitely got some aftermarket pieces on it. Both cars do, but it's a wild combination that turned heads all weekend long. Now I've seen a lot of hot rods and custom cars, but this car really got my attention because it's got a great style, it's got a great body shape, and it's all built from scratch. This is built by Marcel's Custom Metal, designed by Chip Foose and Luke DeLay. This is an absolute masterpiece when it comes to the design and the execution of the metalwork. It is an incredible car. It's a hand-fabricated aluminum body, and you can see some of the seams here where it's been metal finished, it's been sanded. It's absolutely flawless from front to back. And this thing has got an LS engine in it. It's got a Tremec 6-speed, Winter's quick change under the back, 4-wheel independent suspension. This thing could be driven, but I don't know that I'd ever want to take a chance on damaging this one-of-a-kind body. I always pay attention to stance, and this 32 Ford Roadster's got it figured out. This thing's got an extreme drop in the front, big old tires on the back, and sitting next to it is another 32 Ford Roadster. This one's not quite as aggressive as far as the stance goes, but it's got a really neat combination. It's got a Buick nail head with 8-stack injection. That's real deal Hillborn stuff right there. And this thing has got some really great hot rod details. You can see those custom louvers in the hood top. It's got wide 5 wheels, Firestone dirt track tires, a killer pair of Deuce Roadsters. Now this is a little more my speed right here. This is a custom paint job that has stood the test of time. You can see there is some age here, there's some damage, but for the most part you can still see that design, you can still see those colors, you can still see the stripes. This thing's got every trick in the book. It's got all the old school paint tricks with panel paint, it's got fades, it's got airbrush work, a little bit of everything on this car. You can even see a mural on the back with some sort of body of water here with a sailboat. Just a really creative paint job from back in the day. Definitely a 70s type paint job that somebody has preserved over the years and then added a set of wheels to this thing to freshen it up. Here's another 32 Ford Roadster, another killer stance with Firestone dirt track tires, wide 5 hubs, and under the hood, once again, we've got a flathead Ford V8 with Arden cylinder heads, this time with 2 Stromberg carburetors. And here's another 32 Ford, this time with a Chevrolet motor under the hood, and you can already see it right there. That's a 409 under the hood of this 32 Ford 3-window coupe. This thing's got full fenders, it's got a slick paint job, and just look at the engine detail treatment on this thing. It's got Chevrolet orange, it's got polished aluminum pieces, it's got 2 4s with a custom aluminum scoop that's got some cool fins on top. Just a really great combination of parts here. And overall this car is really cool too. It's got a great stance, good wheel and tire combination, just one killer hot rod. Now if you know me, you know that I like stuff that's a little bit rough around the edges, but I couldn't walk past this car without showing it to you guys. This is an absolute masterpiece. This car has millions of dollars spent on it. It's definitely out of everybody's league as far as money, as far as budgets, as far as amount of hours spent on it. This thing is ridiculously cool too. It's got crazy proportions. It's a hand-built body. It's fashioned after an early Corvette, but it is completely custom, 100% front to back. You'll see inside of it, it's got a wild interior, and this thing has an LS12 engine. It's a V12 based off of the popular GM LS engine. Insane paint job, lots of chrome, lots of custom trim pieces. It's very deserving of the Riddler Award as well as the Triple Crown and any other events it goes to. You know this thing is a contender anywhere it goes. And here's another 32 Ford, another 3-window coupe with a good chop on it. This thing's got a great stance. It's got some Halibran wheels, Firestone tires. It's got a blister on the side of the hood there. That means we've got a big motor in there. And then look at this scoop. This is an old school Algon fuel injection unit. Very rare piece, and they've done a great job fitting that hood so that it just absolutely looks like it goes with this car. Lots of great pieces on this thing. You can see the drilled wishbones up front. You can see those big Firestone dirt track tires on the back, filling out the wheel wells perfectly. This thing's got stance, it's got character. It's definitely a mean looking hot rod. Speaking of mean looking hot rods, look at this thing. This thing is stretched, it's chopped, it's channeled, it's sectioned, it is everything. And it is a killer hot rod with a killer combination under the hood and poking out of the hood. This thing's got a magnesium blower with a bug catcher on it. All of that is bolted to a Hemi. This thing is absolutely killer, and it's got a bunch of good parts on it. Lots of custom pieces on this car, and as we back up, we just see the crazy profile, the crazy stance, and this thing's got a killer set of tires and wheels on it. It's got some American Racing 12-spoke spindle mount wheels. You can see they've adapted disc brakes to it. You can also see that custom center cap, really neat combination. They're coated in gold and wrapped in M&H Racemaster front runner tires. Out back, it's got a set of Halibran wheels with knockoffs. It's got Firestone cheater slicks on the back. Just a crazy cool combination of vintage magnesium pieces and high-end hot rod details. This is by far one of the most insane vehicles I've ever seen. This is a Pontiac Trans Am, but look under the hood. This is insanity. This thing's got basically like Formula One level fabrication and innovation in it. Look at where the coilovers are. I mean, it's got cantilever setups, and the engine is all the way back behind the firewall. So this thing has got crazy weight balance. It's super wide. It's got slicks all the way around, crazy fender flares, and all of the aerodynamics you could ever ask for, made out of carbon fiber, of course. And this thing's got killer horsepower. It's got every race car detail you can imagine, from the ducting to the onboard fire suppression system. I mean, this thing is ready to race. And for now, it's on the show circuit. This thing's been in Hot Rod Magazine. It's been all over the internet. But this thing is a legitimate performer, and I got a feeling once the new wears off of this thing, this guy is going to put it to the test. I drove my old Corvette to the Triple Crown of Rotting. I enjoyed driving this car on the back roads and then going to and from the show. It's about a 15-mile trip from the hotel to the show, so that gives you a little bit of seat time. And check out this Chevelle station wagon. This was one of my favorite cars at the whole event because it was just simple and clean, really cool stance, good steel wheels and dog dish caps, and just a great looking car. In the ARP booth, there was a collection of cars that were all built by the same guy, Scott Sullivan, including this incredible Oldsmobile bubble top. This thing's got fuel injection on it. It's got a killer stance, cool color combination on this thing, just a really good looking car. And then behind it is an iconic 55 Chevrolet that Scott built several years ago. This thing's had several different tire and wheel combinations on it, and he just recently switched it to these Krager Super Trick wheels. It's got that 70s and 80s look nailed, and of course the stance on this car, it would look good with just about any wheel and tire combination, but the Super Tricks look really cool on there. Another car out of the Scott Sullivan camp is this bubble top, and this thing's got a wild color on it. Again, stance is absolutely perfect. It's also got a 409 under the hood, which makes it even cooler. And then check out these wheels. These are Bogart wheels that are made to replicate the original motor wheel flies, like what he used on the Cheese Whiz car originally. Here's another really cool traditional hot rod. This is a Ford Model A coupe, and you can see it's got a flathead under the hood, but this is not a V8. This is actually V12, and it's got aluminum cylinder heads by Austin. It's got a blower. It's got lots of carburetors on it. It's got lots of cool details, including that generator that looks like a beehive, and we'll go over to the other side and see that it has a beehive oil filter on it. Lots of good pieces on this thing, a cool stance, cool look altogether, and sitting next to it is another old school piece. This one's got some E&J headlights on it. This one's got your standard V8 flathead, but it's got Navarro cylinder heads, it's got fuel injection up top, a really great combination of parts. So here's a little bit different take on a Tri-5 gasser. This is definitely a high dollar build. You can tell by some of the details on it that there was no expense spared. It's a 56 Chevy 150 two-door sedan. You can see they've taken the front bumper off. They've got some great gasser pieces. It's got some magnesium looking wheels, fender well headers, and then under the hood is where it gets a little bit more interesting. It's an LS engine with a Whipple supercharger, and it looks like they've fabricated this Hilborn look-alike setup. It's a lot bigger than an original Hilborn, but they've made it kind of look like an old school gasser setup. So on the inside, this thing's got some more old school details. You can see it's got that crazy shifter. It's got air conditioning. You can see they've got the glove box open. It's got the vents there. This thing is definitely a mixture of different styles. The LS engine I could probably do without, because I just like old school horsepower, but I'm sure this thing runs good. I'm sure it hits the road just fine, and it definitely has a cool old school 60s gasser look. Here's another hot rod that got my attention. This time it's a Ford Model A two-door sedan, and this thing's got a pretty wild engine setup. So it's got an inline six-cylinder engine, and it's got an old school McCulloch style centrifugal supercharger. Notice the V-belt pulley on the front, and notice the draw-through carburetor on the back. This is a really wild setup. You notice the pipe going across the engine over to the other side. This thing's got a lot of hand fabricated pieces, and it's just plain cool. So we look around on this thing on the inside, we'll notice that it's got a roll bar in it. We'll notice it's got a detachable steering wheel to make it easier to get in and out of, some old school buckets, and lots of old school pieces inside of here. And then underneath the back, it's got a quick change rear end, some cool little bumpers and push bar on the back, disc brakes for safety, slick paint job, cool details, cool hot rod. Here we got another custom C3 Corvette. This time we've got a stretched front end. Notice there's no headlights at all. I'm assuming they're tucked up under the grill. Lots of custom paint work. Look at that pearl shining in the sun. Some cool stripes, side pipes, big wide 5-spoke wheels and raised white letters, tunnel ram, 2.4s, velocity stacks. It's got it all. Check out this really wild custom car that's based off of a 56 Ford Thunderbird. And this is Darrell Starbird's original 1960 concept design, built by Cliff Starbird out of Derby, Kansas. And you can see this thing has got some crazy paint on it, candy apple red. It's got white upholstery that is just out of this world. Notice that it doesn't have a steering wheel anywhere, and also notice that it's got a television mounted between the two seats. This thing is futuristic. Obviously, it's got the bubble. It's got tons of custom body work, but this is actually a replica of the car. It's not the real one. It's just a very faithful replica and tribute to the original. There were just a handful of gassers at the Triple Crown of Rotting, and here's a couple of them. A 55 Chevy, lots of details there, and then a little Chevy 2 that's sitting up high. This is a little more of like a street freak because it's sitting up high in the back. Small block Chevy, tunnel ram and 2.4s, velocity stacks, fender well headers. It's got some great hand lettering on it with some gold leaf. I mean, a great paint job as well, but that hand lettering, I mean, that is really what makes this car. And you see the name on the side of there, Troublemaker. Got some great pinstriping around the gold leaf lettering. What a cool looking gasser this is. Now I really like this 60s style custom. This is a Model A pickup truck. You can see it's got a nail head. It's got 4 carburetors on it. Lots of chrome, lots of polished aluminum pieces. And of course that gold paint is just absolutely dancing in the sun. Notice the exhaust pipes going up to the bed. We'll look at those in just a second. But inside, very tastefully done. It's got white upholstery, gold details. It's got white wall tires, chrome wheels, and look back here. These pipes go right to the back, and they kind of go along with those canted tail lights. A really crazy looking combination that totally screams 1960s. Now here's a really neat one. This is a Studebaker, and it's got a really cool look to it. It's got A-gas markings on the quarter panel, but I'm not sure if this thing has any real racing history or not. Even if that's been added at some point, it's got a good look to it. And this thing's got a cool hot rod stance. Notice it's not sitting up high in the front like most gassers. and it's got those rear fenders radius for clearance for those big pie crust slicks. 5-spoke wheels look good on there. And then under the hood, it's got a big block Chevy with some extremely rare Eelco finned aluminum valve covers. You hardly ever see those. And you notice it's just got a single 4-barrel carburetor on it. This thing probably hits the road just fine. It's easy to work on. It's probably a lot of fun. One of the biggest attractions for the Triple Crown of Rotting is the amount of automotive celebrities that are on hand. Chip Foose obviously is at the top of the food chain when it comes to automotive celebrities, and he does a lot to help this event grow, along with a lot of other very talented hot rod builders and TV personalities like Dave Kindig. Lots and lots of people come here from far away to make this event bigger and better each year, and I can only imagine what it's going to be like next year. I hope you enjoyed following along. Thank you for watching.